So the comic that I chose to read this month is called Deadly Class. Um, it is also volume 1. It's 1987 Reagan Youth. If you're looking to read it, there's 3 out currently. It's relatively new, so if you wanted to start reading it, you wouldn't be too far behind. So the first thing is the creative team behind Deadly Class, which is listed on the very first page. So as you can see, it says Deadly Class. The co-creators are Rick Remender and Wes Craig. Rick was the writer and Wes was the artist. Over here you have Lee Loughridge, which was the colorist, Russ Wooten, which was the letterer and logo designer, and Sebastian Gerner, which was the editor of the book. These are the main characters, which we'll talk about later, but this is Marcus. He's the main character. So there's the first page. Alright, the publisher's Image, as you can see right here, Image Comics. It's 160 pages long. That's counting all of the introductions and stuff. There's a lot of extra from the author and that kind of thing. Lots of the art in the background. The next thing would be, is it a genuine graphic novel? So the answer is no, it is not a genuine graphic novel. It's a compilation. It has about 6 issues, I guess, in it, if that's what you call them. The main character, as I said, is Marcus. He's pictured on the very first page, right here. This is Marcus. Marcus. He's a homeless teenager. He has a lot of problems other than being homeless. He has some mental issues that he's going through because his parents died, and he's still kind of reeling from that, even though it was a few years back. He used to live in a group home for boys, but he ran away, so now he just lives on the streets with a bunch of old men. You meet him really early on, so he's kind of, you don't really know his name or anything until you're a little ways in and he meets the rest of the cast, but he's kind of interesting, but we'll talk about him when we talk about his arc. The goal in the story for him, for this particular volume, would be that he doesn't want to be alone. He wants to find his place in society. He feels very lonely and sad and depressed, even to the point where he's ready to commit suicide, which is really sad. There's actually a scene where he's about to do it. The entire beginning of the book is dedicated to kind of telling you his history, why he has so many issues, that kind of thing. It's really interesting because they really lay everything out for him, and you learn a lot about him in the first few pages. After that is the conflict. So like I said, the goal is that he has to kind of find his purpose, or like find his place in society. So the conflict in Act 2 definitely is focused around that goal. So what happens is Marcus in the beginning is very lonely. He's like traveling down this really weird market street where there's a bunch of partiers and stuff, and all the captions are first person narrative, so you're reading everything that he's thinking, other than just what he's saying. And he goes through like this wild goose chase with these random people, and you have no idea who they are. And along the way, you meet these teenagers who somehow or another have been able to help him as he's running from these so-called cops. They do weird things like shove other people in front of the cops or open the doors. You don't really pay attention to them, but they are teenagers, and they kind of have a really interesting appearance, each of them. So they kind of do stick out to you, but then again, you don't think they're going to be part of the story. And then you find out that these teenagers are part of a secret society of assassins. They've been trained at this special high school that they're attending. And he's been invited to join them. But they have to save him from the cops first, and then he's invited to join them. So in Act 2, his goal of not being alone and kind of fitting in and finding his place in society really comes to the front because he's at this high school in this new society with all of these people. And there's all these cliques, and they define each clique for you. And it's kind of interesting because it's the same cliques as you have at like a normal high school, but you wouldn't think that because it's like this special school, which I'll show you a picture of the school real quick because it's pretty interesting. Probably one of my favorite pages out of the book. It's a double page spread. This is the school. This guy right here, he's one of the instructors at the school. He is also the guy who invites Marcus into the school. And then, yeah, kind of creepy. It's kind of secret. It's called King's Dominion School of the Deadly Arts. You literally learn how to kill people here, which is pretty awesome, I guess. And then you also learn about the cliques later on, which would be, I thought this page was interesting also, like I said, it's because they have cliques like normal high schools, but you wouldn't expect that at a, here they are. So this is the cliques. So you have the preps, and then you have the, they're called Sotovatos, but they're like cartel people, because all of these kids like come from they have a background. They're like, their parents might have gone to the school as well. So like the preps are CIA, FBI children, and then you have the Dixie Mob, which is like the racist white people whose parents were like Nazis and stuff. Like she's the leader of them, and her dad was a Nazi. And then you have Sotos Vatos, which are kids who had parents in the cartel in like South America and Mexico. You have the Jersey Kings, which are like mob kids. Like this guy is the son of Polly Caravaggio. And then you have the Final World Order, which is like the gangsters, the stereotypical like black like gangster group, which is them. They come from Compton, I think, is where this kid from, at least. And then you have the Asians. So as you can see, it's pretty stereotypical. You have your preps, your white people, Mexican people. You have these random mobsters, black people, and then Asians. Very, very racial and stereotypical. But that's the cliques. And then, like I said, Act 2 definitely goes along with the goal because he has to find his place within these cliques. And it's kind of interesting the way that he does it, which actually happens later on when he goes to lunch. So the pages are kind of labeled interesting too in Act 2. So it tells you like what hour he's in. Like here it says 5th period hand-to-hand combat up here, and it shows the instructor and all the kids. This guy is actually one of Vladimir Putin's assassin's sons, which is kind of interesting. It has a lot of ties to society now also, but that's how the pages are labeled. Act 2 is literally everything at the high school, so from the moment he starts his very first day at the high school up until he kind of finds his own group, that's all of Act 2. It's all focused around his goal of finding his place and his purpose, and he's faced with a lot of different stuff where he has to choose whether he wants to lie or make really hard choices, such as killing a certain person or not killing a certain person, in order to like build his reputation at this school. So the kind of stuff that he's facing is the same stuff that you would face in normal high school. Like, do I need to lie to make this girl like me, or do I need to dress differently to make this other girl like me? Except it's in a different type of atmosphere where he's saying, do I need to kill this homeless guy to make this group of people like me, or do I need to kill this Mexican to make this group of people like me? So it kind of has an interesting twist on the normal high school experience for people. What's next? Oh, character arc. So you end up with, as you can see, there's 7 total characters in the story, with Marcus being the main one. Marcus has a great story arc in this first volume. Now, the rest of them, you don't really know that much about them. You learn a little bit about Billy and a little bit about Saya, but not much, and they don't really change. And I think that's because they really wanted to focus on Marcus in this volume, and I can definitely see them kind of bringing up the history of all of these children or teenagers as the story goes on, and their arcs kind of unfolding in the upcoming volumes of Deadly Class. As for Marcus, his story arc is very, very good. So he starts out really depressed, kind of cynical too. So you'll see when they show the scenes where he's on the streets that he has a very terrible outlook on life, and it's understandable because he's living without food, he's sleeping with random people in homeless shelters, he's this teenage kid, and he has his own issues. So it's obviously understandable that he's cynical and sad and depressed. But by the end of the story, he's kind of found his place, and that's why I found the resolution kind of very satisfactory, is because he does have that arc where he becomes more of the truthful, outspoken, he's more confident in himself, and he doesn't have such a bad outlook on life. In fact, he has this entire monologue where he says this, kind of like, this is what I was feeling, and then this is how I'm feeling now, this is how I've changed, just in the short period of time of knowing these people. So that's good for him. The story itself definitely has a beginning, middle, and end. Again, the beginning was the setup and the introduction. The middle was everything about the conflict, and the end raised some questions about the next volume, and it solved his goal of finding his place within this high school. Let's see. Oh, I guess there's another kid, this guy right here. He's the guy from Compton. He kind of has a little arc of himself, because you kind of find out how he's made up this reputation of his in order to make people like him, which is something that Marcus has to face. But Marcus deals with him, and you kind of see how that plays out. But I didn't really see him changing by the end that much, other than everyone knew that he was lying by the end, so he was not as exuberant. I don't know if he learned his lesson or not, because he is continuing to lie, but I guess we'll see in Volume 2, which I'll probably be starting tomorrow. I'm really excited about it, because this is probably one of the better comics that I've read lately. And then the next question would be, do any of the characters have a change? I've already answered that. Does the story have effective transitions? The story has really effective transitions. It flows very nicely. You don't have any weird pauses. It doesn't throw you out. There's nothing like that. It's the page turners are there. You read it and you say what's going to happen next, and you turn, and the transitions from not just panel to panel, but from like scene to scene is great. So as far as transitions go, it's really great. The readers definitely know where they are and when they are happening, because there's very obvious changes. But again, they flow so nicely that you don't really notice them, or at least not in a bad way, and you really understand what's going on. Does the story make use of the page as a mini comic idea? Yes, it does. Almost every page has something that happens here that is resolved by the end, or at least if it happens on this page, it'll be resolved by the end of the odd number page. This comic actually uses a lot of instances where they will fill the even page and the odd page, and you'll read it like this all the way across. It's almost like a double page spread, but it has panels. But it comes from this corner to here, here to here, here to here. And I could find the example for you. It's kind of interesting the way they do it. It's kind of the first time I've ever seen it done. So that was new for me. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, I don't know. It happens quite a bit, though. Y'all might have to check it out for yourself. Oh, it's... Never mind. I know where it's at. Let's see, here. So this is a perfect example of that. So you have this really huge image at the top, and you start here, which on the beginning of the book you'll notice has the dates. So it's kind of like a journal. The very beginning, it says this is when he's homeless. It says, this is today, this is what I'm thinking. You see all these captions. This is all of his thoughts. This is Marcus. So you read from here to here, and then you start here, and this is kind of interesting too. So you read here first in the black. You read the black. But the black this is panels. So you read from here to here, and then you read here, 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 and then you read from this corner all the way over to that corner. So if you can kind of see that, it's like a double page spread. They use that a lot in this story. So this happens the same way as just the single pages. You have this beginning and you have the end. So yes, it definitely makes use of the mini comic page by page kind of thing. Directional flow. So one thing I did notice about this book was there are some instances where they use directional flow, but there are also some instances where they don't. So, but one way that they have made up for that is by creating these arrows in the gutters of the comics. So, let's see. This is perfect. So as you can see, this one starts out, and you have him sitting right here, and you kind of have the lines where this one points, the tables point here, and then these tables point here, and then this points here, and the arm and the table points here. But you'll notice that when they get to here, it stops doing that. But if you look close enough, there's a little tiny arrow right here, and that's how they've made up for directional flow. So if the pictures aren't flowing like they were in these first 5 panels, they add these little arrows, and they say, oh, you're looking here, and now you're reading here, and now you're coming over here. And then again, this one has more of the directional flow, so they don't need the arrows. But as you read through, you see these arrows a lot, pointing you in the direction that they want you to go. One thing I was worried about when I opened the book was the captions, and one thing I really had to learn when I started reading comics was like how the dialogue worked, because sometimes I would get out of order and that kind of thing. But I was worried that with all these captions, because some pages have really heavy captions like this, but like take this times like 10, and it's just everywhere. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be completely lost in this book. But no, it's actually surprisingly flows very well. You don't get lost at all. So that's a great thing. Directional flow, again, it's there, but it's not always there. It's not very consistent. The arrows are more prevalent than anything. Would I recommend this to my classmates? Yes. Read this. This is amazing. One of my favorites right now. I might change my mind when I read something else. I'm kind of indecisive like that, but this is phenomenal. It is very dark, very creepy. It's not uplifting at all, but it gives you this really twisted insight into the mind of a high school student and all the things that we experienced when we were in high school. And it's kind of crazy because it's assassins and they're killing people, but it really does apply. And I think even high schoolers could read this. Right now, my sister, who's a junior, could read this and say, this is the kind of stuff that I'm dealing with, but just in the regular world. I don't have to worry about killing someone or assassinating someone. But it's very, very effective, very, very good, and you should read it because it's phenomenal. Would I recommend it to my friends? Yes, over and over again. I would say read Deadly Class, because it's just really good, and you can't put it down once you start it. It's one of those ones where, like, oh, I'm going to stop when I get to the second issue or the second chapter, and then you get there and you just can't stop turning the pages. So friends, classmates, read this. You will love it. It's a conversation starter. It's something I could talk about for hours and never be bored. Any other observations? The art, the color is something that's really interesting here. So I'd really like to show you how it starts out. So depending on the mood of the particular pages or story or section of the story you're reading, you'll notice that the art is kind of color themed. So like this one has lots of purples and blues, but then you have pages like these ones that is blues and grays with like pops of oranges. And then you'll have pages like this, which are greens and yellows, and then you have red. And red is always bad in this book because for some reason the only time they use red is if someone is dead. That's how you know they've killed someone. But depending on what's going on, like he's hurt here and he's about to be killed, and it's these really dark, creepy, like gross tones. It's like green and yellow, and you see a little bit of orange up here, and the pops of orange are kind of everywhere. But the colors are really interesting in this book. And then it switches, like he meets all these people, and most of the time when he's with them, you see the blacks and then the neon blues. So the color is really amazing in this book. So if you're an artist, I think you would enjoy this just as much as someone who is only in it for the story, because the coloring really is something to compliment and talk about. I could have conversations just about the color and the emotions that they evoke. His first day of class, it's dark with browns and blacks, and it's very regal and kind of scary because you don't know what's going to happen. So it's really amazing. You guys should read it. Thank you, and please read Deadly Class.